Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First, thanks for visiting my channel. I appreciate it. If you'd hit the like button before you leave, that's a great deal of help to me. And I'd love it if you'd subscribe to the channel. It's growing. I have close to 1,200 subscribers last I looked, and I'm putting out 2 to 3 videos per week. I think they're relevant and useful, especially for beginning silversmiths. So if you'd like, subscribe. And for those of you who've been supporting me through the coffee link up top of the YouTube page, I really appreciate it. That makes me feel really good when people send me coffees. So if you care to do that, feel free to. If not, that's okay too. But thank you very much for those people who have. Today, I'm going to make kind of a fancy tension bracelet. I've done tension bracelets over the years, and I'll explain what that means in a little bit, but this one, I've seen a few examples similar to it, and so I'm going to try and duplicate kind of this so the clasp is hidden underneath the top of the bracelet. So I think you'll find this one to be a kind of a cool design. It's clean and modern looking, at least when I'm visualizing it in my mind anyway, so we'll see. But let's get started. For this piece, I picked out this I guess it's probably either chalcedony or some sort of white agate. It doesn't have a lot of patterning or anything. It's just got some subtle internal structure. But it's a nice pale kind of simple stone, and I thought it would look good in something that's going to have kind of a simple design. So what I'm picturing here in my mind is this will be the top part here with a base piece of 18 gauge, a silver disc there, and I'll mount a bezel for this on top of it. And then we'll have a band that goes all the way around and has a loop on this end that hooks underneath this one. And you make sure it's nice and springy so that when you put it on, it hooks and then it stays on nicely. But we'll have a little clasp on the back, and I'll show you how I'm going to make that so that it's sort of hidden. But first step, I think, would be to make a bezel for this. So we'll do that first. But materials we'll need, as always, I use hard solder for almost everything. I use a spray-on flux, and it is Mighty Flux from Rio Grande. I used to use one called Battered Self-Pickling Flux, which I think was the same company made both. Either one works just fine. For the bezel, I'm going to use 3/16 inch fine silver bezel, and this is 28 gauge, I believe. I think I'm going to use 12 gauge square for the band and for a lot of the design. I may change my mind on that. I might use 10 gauge for some of it, but we'll see. And then for the disc and some of the other components, I'm going to use 18 gauge sterling sheet, which is a pretty thick sheet. All right. Let's make a bezel for the stone first. Not sure if anybody noticed, but we passed 100 videos just recently, which kind of blows me away since I think we started doing this in March. And when I say we, I'm talking about my wife, who helps me out a lot with graphics and things like that, and motivation, kick in the pants when I need it. chose sort of a flattish stone for this one because I want the whole thing to be kind of disky, made out of discs mostly. This is kind of like a disc. Okay, so need to make a silver disc out of that 18 gauge. Grab this corner right here. I actually, to make this circle, I just traced a quarter. Where did I put you, quarter? There you are. And that's, if you don't have a compass, that's an easy way to make a circle. You can just trace something around. I just thought a quarter would be about the right size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it in place here. And I'm just going to scribe a line around it with my pick here. And then really what I need to do is cut out a square first, and then I'll trim it off, and then I'll file it in order to make it nice and round. Another option you could do if you have access to one, which I actually do, but I don't think it would be big enough for this, is use a disc cutter. Disc cutters are snazzy little tools that I kind of find handy. I'll show you what one looks like. Okay, so a disc cutter is a double steel block like this with holes cut through it, and you can stick a piece of sheet in there, and then you find the pin that has the right size. That's not the right one. And it's got kind of a sharp edge around there and nice clean lines here. So once you get your piece of sheet positioned in there, you just hit it with a hammer really hard and it knocks out a nice little circle. With stuff like 18 gauge, you got to hit it pretty hard to make it go all the way through in one shot. If you don't get it in one shot, sometimes you get a bounce effect and you'll have a disc that's not quite right. So, but in general, these things are pretty cheap and they do come in handy pretty frequently. So I would invest in one of those if you have the opportunity and you can find a good deal on one. I'm just going to follow the line I scribed. A lot of people would saw this. It always seemed like something, if you can do it with a pair of snips just as well and quicker. I've always been inclined to use snips. Now I need to do a little bit of filing. That's pretty good. I can fine tune it when I get closer to the end here. My hardest part is always finding the center of stuff like this. So I can show you one trick that I use sometimes. If I draw a square, now if I go from corner to corner here, I get pretty close to the center here. That can at least give us a little bit of an approximation, so when I'm aiming, put it down there, I can kind of center that. Something that's a little different than some projects I've shown before is I'm soldering a little tiny bezel here. I should say, I mean the mass of the bezel is small, to this big thick piece of 18 gauge sterling sheet, which has a significantly higher mass than that. And it's also in a position where it's harder to get hot. versus the bezel which is on top here, which is going to be really exposed to the flame as I point it downwards. So the trick will be to get this bottom piece hot enough without melting the bezel on top. And that's one of those things that takes a little practice sometimes. Struggled with that a bit when I first started doing this. So I'm using quite a bit of solder on here. Just got to kind of make sure it's touching the sides and the bottom. Now when I'm thinking about how to get these both up to 1450 degrees, I need to heat that bottom piece longer because it's got a lot more mass. So I'm going to kind of actively avoid the bezel while I'm doing this, pointing it everywhere but directly at the bezel. There's quite a bit of surface area inside of there, so I got to hit that once in a while too. I'm going to keep it moving all the time. And I'm watching the solder. I'm starting to get a little flow there now. There we go. For a minute there was a gap over there where it didn't quite flow. So I had to keep heating it a little bit more to get it hot enough. And I can already see that it's not perfectly centered. But what I can do is I can file it to alter the dimensions just a little bit so it looks more centered. So I'm not going to spend too much time trying to push that bezel around on the surface of that thing. I'm going to use a piece of 12 gauge for the band here. And I think I've never made one quite like this, so I'm guessing usually about 6.5 inches is good for one of these kind of bracelets, but I may cut it down a little bit after I look at it. So I'm going to measure about 6.5 inches. Let's do this as an experiment. I cut a strip of paper. And we'll cut it about the same length as this wire just to get a feel if that's about the right size. So this is going to have another ring on the end of it too. So it's going to stick out to about right there. So I actually think that's probably a good size. That'll make about kind of a typical size bracelet, I think, for most people. So let's try that out. You know, like I said, I've never made one exactly like this, so we'll have to see how it comes out. So first I'm going to straighten out this 12 gauge. File these flat. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to put a little twist, and I want to cordon it off here, and then keep the twist just in the center of this, just for decorative purposes, and also it'll make it a little springier in the long run. So let's find the center. So that's about the center. So I'm thinking maybe if we go 1 inch to either side about. And that's where we'll stop the twist right there. So I use C-clamps for this. You could probably grab it with any number of things. I like C-clamps because they don't have any give. So if you clamp them down pretty tight, they're not going to move on you. In there. So I'm going to try and clamp it so, see, I put the mark right on the edge there. See, it's lined up with the edge of the C-clamp there. Okay, so I've got them clamped off at both of the spots, and all you got to do is just usually twist it one complete time. Like that. Until they're lined back up again. And you can take them off. Okay, so that isolated a twist in the middle there, which is kind of nice. Now, my next step is going to be to solder this on here. I need to attach it kind of like that. And it's pretty important I get a really good solder joint here. I think what I'm going to do, so I don't just have an edge joint there, is I'm going to file part way down through this so it's got like a little lip. And then that way I'll be able to solder it to the edge and to the bottom a little bit. And that'll make a stronger bond. So I'm just going to take my bastard file. You can see what I did there. I kind of just made it so it has a lip. Never actually done that, so we'll see if this makes for. It seems like it would make for a stronger joint there. So I guess we'll find out. I'm doing it there because that is an area on this bracelet where it's going to get some flexing, because people mess with the geometry of the band in order to get it to fit their wrist. Something else you should know, if you're using a little torch, like a propane torch, without any oxygen, or one of those little butane torches that look like creme brulee torches, you may not be able to get something that's spread out this big, hot very easily, enough to solder hard silver solder. So when you start getting things that are spread out like this, it's a lot easier if you have a hotter torch. Because, as always with sterling, you got to get the entire piece pretty close to temperature, which in this case is 1450 degrees, in order for the solder to stick to it. And if you focus just over here, this is going to act as a radiator. Focus over here, this starts cooling off. So you got to keep it moving all the time. That's one of the keys to being good at this, I think. Now I'm watching the color of the metal. When it gets to that kind of reddish hue, I'm getting close, and then sometimes I can bump the heat up just a little bit by focusing on that spot. But as you see, it didn't really flow, so I wasn't quite there. So I need to get it just a little bit hotter in order for that to flow. You can see what I was trying to achieve there was I hope you can see this in frame, a bottom seam and a side seam here. So it looks like we achieved that. So that should give it a little more strength as far as the connection there. We also need to create a little ring right here that's going to connect underneath here. So I guess I'm going to use the same size wire. Okay, so you could wrap this around any number of things. I think I'm going to use one of my dapping blocks or dapping punches. This one is going to make it too big, I think. I want a little bit smaller than that, maybe. Let's try this one and see how it looks. Square wire is going to try to warp on you and go and twist. You're doing stuff like this, so you need to stop. Straighten it out. It does that because it's trying to find an easier way to bend. You're bending it this way, you're compressing the inside bend here and you're stretching the outside bend, so it's really puts a lot of pressure on the square wire. So let's see if that's kind of in the size range I'm thinking of. I think so. Yeah, let's do it about like that. I'm going to go ahead and solder it, and then I'll flatten it out a little better. Let's just round this out. Now I'm going to work on some of the little unevenness here, the wobbles. Alright, I think I'm going to give this a little file here. But I think I might as well just solder it right where the solder joint is, just for fun. So we got to do a little clasp on the back here. Really what I'm trying to do is make it so when I get this hot enough to add some stuff on the back here, that this doesn't fall off, so I wanted to support it a little bit. But I need to make a smaller disc of the same kind of silver, thick stuff. And then I think I'm going to use a piece of maybe 14 gauge square to kind of curve along the edge here. And then we'll create a little kind of a slot for this ring to actually fit in on the back side. It'll make more sense when I show you real quick here. So I cut out a little circle, kind of rounding the edges a little bit so it's not going to be sharp to someone wearing it. The other side doesn't matter, but on the side it's going to actually face down on top of the wrist like this. So this side doesn't matter. This side I want it to be kind of smoothish. And what we need to do is find a 14 gauge square, which I probably have a piece floating around here somewhere. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I'm going to try it. So my idea is to solder it on the edge of this in a curve like that, and then I'll flip it over and solder it this way so that it creates a space under here for this thing to slide into. So, and I'll have to file a notch in this to make it a little narrower so it'll fit here. That's why I used a smaller gauge of silver here for the little part that's going to raise it up a little bit. So see how that goes. I'm going to have to do that right here. One of the things people ask me about is how I keep my spray bottles from getting clogged up. I don't. Just periodically I empty them out and run some really hot water through them. And that seems to dissolve a lot of the stuff that's gummed up inside of them. And then you can make them last a little bit longer. You still got to replace them once in a while. What I'm doing here is I'm sweating a little bit of solder onto that piece of square wire. Now, in theory, I should be able to just balance it on there. Trying to get it kind of on the edge there. Now, the trick will be getting this to balance on there. But honestly, you know what? It probably doesn't even matter when it does flow. I think here's my thought. Some people ask me to have my thought process out loud. So I'm thinking I can probably solder it on like this, and then while it's getting ready to flow, I can put a little pressure on this side so it lifts it up like that, and then just let it solder like that, and then let go once it solidifies. But to do that, I'll need to sweat a little solder on this side of it as well, so that it's already in place. And then when it flows, I can just kind of tip it up. So let's see how that goes. We'll give it a try. What's the worst thing that can happen? The reason I thought about the squirt bottle thing was this one's starting to shoot in a weird direction when I squirt it. Okay, lots of solder on there now. That looks pretty good. soldered it so there's kind of a slot here. And what we'll do is we'll file a narrower spot on this side that will actually allow you to slide it into that slot from the back. At least that, in theory, that's what we'll do. But for now, I think I'm going to go ahead and pick with. And in order to do that, I'm going to bend it so it'll fit into my pickle jar a little bit better. And then we'll straighten it out and set the stone and polish it and do the final touches on it and stuff like that after that. So. Do a little bit of cleanup with the Dremel, and I'm going to go ahead and set this stone. It's got kind of steep sides and then it's flat on top. So I've pre-filed my bezel down to the level I thought it needed to be in order to get a good grab on that top without actually burying the stone in there. So hopefully that's about the right level. I'm going to go ahead and set him. A lot of people, if this is the first time you've seen one of my videos, I'm unusual in that I use my pliers to actually set stones. A lot of people use bezel pushers and rockers and burnishing tools. There's all sorts of fun tools you can get. You can also get by sometimes with pretty basic stuff. I'm going to do a little bit of burnishing. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and polish this and then I'll show you the final result. I haven't even cleaned this up at all. But a couple of things we need to do. I still haven't made a narrower spot on the ring here to slide into there. And also, in soldering this all together, any kind of work hardening we created by twisting this is gone by now. And so if I want this to be springy, I might want to do a little bit of hand bending it just to do a little bit of work hardening up and down the length of it. Now I'm just going to start shaping it. It's going to basically go like that. However, what I need to do is I need to file a narrower spot. About there. Between that area. And I may just use the Dremel for the sake of speed. So it'll just kind of slot right in there. But in the meantime, I might need to straighten this out so I can get to it. So, okay, so here's what I ended up with. Kind of a pretty little bracelet. And see this bottom part, I made it a little narrower on the end here so that when you pop it in there, it just kind of connects like that. That makes for kind of a cool looking bracelet. Thanks for watching the video. That was the tension bracelet video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button. I'd love to have you subscribe. And check out some of my other videos. I have lots of good content here. And if you're so inclined, feel free to support me up top with a coffee. If not, that's okay too. But either way, I hope you found this useful, and I hope you come back and watch some more stuff. So take care and happy silversmithing.